So, now we move on to this idea of kingdom of ends. So, Kant, through the formulation of the kingdom of ends, asserts the ultimate value of human life and dignity that deserve our utmost respect. So, Kant was a kind of individualist thinker in that sense, that for him the ultimate value in life is that of human life and his dignity, and it demands a kind of utmost respect from others in the society or by the community as a whole. So, there should not be interference, or a kind of instrumental use of human life and his her dignity. So, the kingdom of ends, through that Kant assert the ultimate value of human life and dignity, which must be respected by others in the community. And Kant explains that freedom and autonomy could be realized only in the kingdom of ends, and he explained this in the following words: so far as rational agents are all subjects to universal law, that is based on the categorical imperative, and this universal law then is something that they themselves legislate. So, are all subject to universal laws which they themselves make. They constitute a kingdom, that is a state of commonwealth, and so far as these laws bid them treat each other as ends in themselves, the kingdom so constituted is the kingdom of ends. So, that is the basis of the formation of what he calls kingdom of ends. Thereby he means that human being as a rational and moral agent will govern their life on a universal law, and this universal law is something that is not given to them by the society or by any other kind of authority. They themselves legislate through using their own reason by following this a priori maxim, what he calls categorical imperative. And then when you have a community of such men as a moral rational agent governing themselves by the universal law, then you form a commonwealth or a community where everyone will treat everyone else as an end in themselves, not as a means for something else. That community would be the kingdom of ends, where the dignity and the human life would have utmost respect and regards, and so each will respect everyone else, and thereby the dignity and the human life of each would be respected and acknowledged by everyone else, and therefore human being would be truly free and autonomous in such kingdom of ends. So, in the kingdom of ends, he also distinguishes between the members, and these members are all finite rational agents. So, there is a kind of finiteness to human rationality and human being as a rational agent. There are domains which they do not know. So, he makes this distinction between the members in the kingdom of ends as the finite rational agent and its supreme head, and this supreme head is an infinite rational agent. So, as law making agents of such kingdom, rational agents have what he called dignity, and this dignity is something which is intrinsic, unconditional and incomparable worth or worthiness in the individual. So, this is something which gives meaning to our life, and a human being as a social being, or who prefers to live in the society in association with others, constantly seek that others respect their dignity. When it is not recognized or it is used by others as an instrument for something else, then that human being feels hurt, cheated, betrayed and so on, and that leads to conflict, that leads to enviousness and even violence. So, the kingdom of ends would be a community where everyone will respect everyone else's dignity and thereby treating other as an end in themselves, not as a means for certain ends. So, in this kingdom of ends, every action is right in itself, governed by the universal law. So, everybody would perform their duty and obligation to self and others for its own sake, regardless of the consequences. So, in this kingdom of ends, every action is right in itself, or in its maxim is such that the freedom of the will of each can coexist together with the freedom of everyone in accordance with the universal law. So, there would not be any conflict of freedom and autonomy of one person versus freedom and autonomy of other person. So, everyone can live a free autonomous life without coming into conflict with similar life of others. There is a kind of mutual understanding or respect of freedom and autonomy of each by acknowledging and respecting the dignity of other person as an end in themselves, not as a means. So, Kant argues that in such kingdom, individuals would govern their lives on the principle to treat humanity, whether in thine own person or in that of another, in every case as an end, never only as means. So, that is how human beings would behave in the kingdom of ends. So, where they will treat humanity, and this humanity applies to themselves as well. So, humanity in their own person or in other person. So, in every interaction with others in the society would govern by this law. That is also similar to a kind of categorical imperative, that you treat others as an end in themselves and not merely as a means. And this is not something which you use once and do not use at other occasions. It must be internally and externally consistent. That means in all the cases, in all the circumstances, you must treat others as an end in themselves. Many problems in the society is because, and this applies to all kinds of relationship, your friendship, your family relationship, your community ties. When you see, observe or experience people treating other people as a means for them to achieve certain other ends, then that person treated in such manner feel cheated. They feel their dignity was hurt, and that leads to the problem, that leads to conflict, that leads to enviousness in the society. And to avoid that, human being as a moral agent, as a rational agent, Kant argue, would treat every other human being as an end in themselves, thereby recognizing their dignity, and then they together can live a life of peaceful coexistence where autonomy and freedom of everyone would be respected. So, this too is then based on categorical imperative. He argued that in the kingdom of ends, every man is to be respected as an absolute end in himself. So, the existence of man does not require any further justification. The humanity in any person, whether the self or other, should be treated as an absolute end in themselves, not for any other further ends. And it is a crime against the dignity that belongs to him as human being to use him as mere means for some external purpose. So, in the kingdom of ends, then man must not treat other men as means for certain other ends, but end in themselves, and that would constitute what he calls a community of kingdom of ends, where individual as a rational moral agent, although it is a kind of ideal imagination of such community. Human beings in actual practical life do not really govern themselves according to these principles. Nonetheless, it remains the ideal and only possibility where human being can realize his true and real sense of freedom and autonomy. So Kant understood how difficult it was for human beings to live such principles of morality that tells you to treat everyone as an end in themselves. However, according to Kant, that is the only way we can create an ideal community of moral and rational agents where each would seek happiness in others and perfection in self. This is also a kind of paradox and counterintuitive thinking. So, in the kingdom of ends, Kant argued that human beings will not really crave for happiness. They would be guided by their duty and a sense of obligation to self and others. And in performing that duty, they make themselves worthy of happiness rather than craving for it. So, in their interaction with others, they will try to seek happiness or bring happiness to others' life, and in doing so they will perfect themselves, and thereby when all the members in the community follow the same rule, that they will perfect their own duty and obligation, their own self, and seek happiness in others, the society would be a society of free and autonomous individual in the true sense of the term, and human being can realize the fullest potentiality which nature has endowed them with. That is the use of reason, rationality to lead a life which would be peaceful, harmonious and dignified life. So, to create such a community, Kant wanted the individual to believe and act according to moral laws as if they are already part of such a community. So, it is not that Kant does not realize the practical life and imperfectibility of the practical life. That means human beings do not necessarily guide their action according to the rational principle or according to the moral laws, and yet Kant believed that you must have the absolute moral laws or perfect moral laws in the imperfect society to bring about that ideal community and thereby bringing peace, progress, prosperity in the society or enlightened age. So, in Kant you have a kind of contemplative or ethical understanding where he wants the human subject as a moral agent to think themselves as already part of that community of kingdom of ends. So, it is not real, it is not given, and yet when individual began to think themselves as the member of that community of kingdom of ends and thereby perfecting their sense of duty and obligation, overall gradually there would be the creation of such community. So, there is the realization of imperfect world, but to make the life perfect, ideal, better than the beastly life or subhuman life of existence, you have to have life governed by certain moral laws, and when the majority and the most of the people will govern their life according to the same laws, then you have a society which would be more peaceful, more prosperous, that would recognize the dignity of each and thereby the coexistence or the peaceful harmonious coexistence of everyone. So, it is only in this community that human beings can attain what is called the highest stage of perfection. So, remember Rousseau, that human beings are free, they are inherently moral, but it is the corrupting influence of society that make them act in a certain manner. And how to avoid the corrupting influence of society or socialization was one of the chief concern for Rousseau. Similarly, in Kant you have a kind of idea that life is imperfect. Most of people live the life of immaturity condition, that means they do not use their own reason, and yet how you can bring about enlightenment, and to do that you have to have a moral laws, and only in this kind of community of kingdom of ends the highest stage of human perfection is possible, where everyone would govern themselves by the same universal laws that they want everyone else to follow unconditionally, and thereby recognizing what is the most worthy thing in human being, that is their dignity. So the highest stage of perfection is possible in such community, and in this kingdom Kant's give priority to a moral sense of duty towards self and others over the theoretical knowledge or logic. So every human beings, and as I have discussed his views on morality, freedom and autonomy, that the rules of morality applies to human being. Why? Because human beings have the innate sense of justness or what is unjust. They may not accept it, maybe for the purpose of their personal selfish interest they tend to ignore it, but nonetheless they have the intuitive understanding of what is just, what is unjust, what is desirable, what is undesirable. They may ignore it, they may sideline it, but nonetheless they cannot remove it from their imagination, from their consciousness and from their inner self. And that is the basic premise of Kantian thinking, where he says that human beings are governed by moral laws, and this moral sense of duty and obligation should come prior to their theoretical knowledge or understanding. So he also wants the individual to lead a life as if it was a kind of prelude to something larger, immortal life or even God. So that is a kind of the realm of metaphysics, where Kant considered this practical empirical life of individual as something which is prelude to the larger life, that is the life of immortality and even God. So he provides some kind of rational basis to religion and religious thinking or faith, not totally rejecting the use of faith or moral concern or life beyond death, so to say, in his thinking, and then that leads to some kind of mysticism or mysteriousness in Kantian thinking.